We have a few people here. I guess we can get started. Um, the session is meant to be a roundtable discussion, so I do have some questions prepared, and hopefully we can all join into the discussion and share some perspectives. Um, but yeah, perhaps I'll just get started. My name is Alyssa Saifu, and I'm a senior research associate at the Diversity Institute. The Diversity Institute is a research consulting firm that is located at Toronto Metropolitan University in Toronto, Ontario. And I'm going to be facilitating this session. So as I indicated, today's session on Black immigrant entrepreneurship, I have a few questions in different areas and hoping that we can have a really nice discussion. Before we get started, I would like to just kind of set the stage and provide some context to the discussion, just talking about some of the basic data and stats about the Black population in Canada and the Black immigrant population specifically. So we know that through our work and through data that's released, we know that small and medium-sized enterprises, or SMEs, in Canada are really the foundation of our economy. And because of that, it's really important that we do what we can to make sure that Black businesses are all created, first of all, and make sure that they're able to scale, because that's really important, of course, to our overall Canadian economy, but also to the Black communities specifically. Unfortunately, we do know that Black entrepreneurs remain significantly underrepresented within Canada's entrepreneurial ecosystem. And in their entrepreneurial journeys, the Black community faces a range of challenges that all the way from societal, organizational, and individual levels as well. In terms of the numbers, we know that as of 2020, there were just over 144,000 Black businesses in Canada. And this is about 2.5% of the total number of businesses in Canada. However, the actual population of Black Canadians is nearly twice that, at about 4%. So there's definitely some work there to do, there in terms of representation. In terms of self-employment, we also do know that Black Canadians are less likely to be self-employed compared to non-racialized individuals. So definitely we see some underrepresentation there. And further, for those with intersecting identities, such as Black women or Black immigrants or Black women immigrants, for example, the barriers are often additive. So they multiply and create additional barriers to entrepreneurial success. In terms of the Black immigrant population, 2021 census data says that about 60% of the Black population in Canada is immigrants. So this is a significant amount of the Black population. And of course, it also translates to a significant portion of Black business owners and Black entrepreneurs also being immigrants. So yeah, like I said, there's certainly progress, and I hope we can kind of discuss that. But we're hoping that this session will be able to explore the current landscape of Black immigrant entrepreneurship in Canada and highlight some of the unique hurdles that this group encounters, and also, based on your experience, strategies that you know of, or like I said, have experience with, that are being used to overcome these challenges. Also, more from an academic side, we definitely hopefully can talk about some of the emerging research and emerging trends. Yeah, and overall, hopefully this conversation will be able to discuss different government initiatives and support programs and other factors that overall can just help to make the innovation ecosystem in Canada more inclusive and equitable. So with that, we have a pretty small group today, actually. So I'm wondering if maybe we could just take a moment and do a quick roundtable of introductions, and perhaps just kind of let us know your name and your background, perhaps, where you're currently working and kind of why you're interested in this session. So yeah, like I said, I work at the Diversity Institute at TMU, and my role right now, my primary role is working on the evaluation of training programs for diverse entrepreneurs. Specifically for a lot of the programs that I work on, the evaluation are for Black entrepreneurs. So this is a group that I've been working with and have some firsthand experience with. So yeah, does anyone else want to go and introduce themselves?
Yeah, I can start. My name is Ephraim Tilla. I am new career support for newcomer, and
Nice.
mostly I work in employment sector and settlement. Yeah, so it's very important for me to understand like what portion of the population is uh, entrepreneur and self-employed as a Black community. And nowadays there are many people is coming from Africa and
Mm-hmm.
different part of the world with uh, full potential and educational background. They can join the employment, the business stream. So I found that very interesting. So thank you for this session.
Awesome, thank you. And do you, in your work working with newcomers, are you specifically working with some of the um, immigrants, Black immigrants from those countries, or are you hoping to learn a little bit more about that?
Yeah, just for newcomers, general newcomers, mostly uh, Black African community. So that's what I'm working now.
Great. Well, it's great to meet you. I know we have another participant here, and I know you mentioned in the chat you were hoping to participate from home or just more listen. I don't know if you're able to maybe put in the chat your name and kind of your background and why you were kind of interested in the session, or of course, just if you're able to unmute. I'll give you a few moments, but perhaps we'll go ahead and start with jump into some of the questions. Yeah, so I had some questions kind of to guide the discussion in a few different areas. So the first would be just talking about the societal challenges and barriers that Black entrepreneurs and specifically those with intersecting identities experience. And then I wanted to talk a bit, hopefully, about organizational support and policy. So different initiatives and programs that you have that personally have experience with or have heard about. Finally, or sorry, next, we want to discuss some of the research that we know of, so more on the academic side. And then finally hoping to kind of discuss our vision for the future and, what a fully inclusive entrepreneurial ecosystem in Canada would look like. So yeah, why don't we start with discussing some of the societal challenges and barriers? So the first question I have is based, and I'll also paste it in the chat as well. So here's the first question. So based on your firsthand experiences and your work or any experiences that you have, what do you think the key societal barriers are that are unique to, oh, we have one more person. I'll let them in here. Hi, welcome. We're just getting started with our roundtable. We're just actually getting started with our first kind of discussion question. Yeah, welcome everyone. We have a small group, so we just kind of did a quick intro, quick intro. I'm the moderator, Alyssa Saifu from the Diversity Institute. Do the two attendees that just came, you guys want to briefly introduce yourselves as well?
Hi, my name is Suhair. I'm working with Mosaic Settlement Organization in Vancouver, BC. And my role is like outreach case manager for the Arabic adult community.
Great. Thank you
you.
so much, Suhair.
Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Grażyna Pakos and I work for Edmonton Immigrant Service Association in Edmonton. I'm a team leader for Library Settlement Program.
Great, thank you and welcome. We just got started. We have a pretty small group today, so I think we can just have more of a hopefully a discussion. And like I said, this session is on Black immigrant entrepreneurship. So we're going to be discussing kind of in your experiences and based on any research that you've done, some of the challenges that this group experiences. Policies and programs that you know of, research, and also kind of talk about the way forward and the future. I'll just repaste the first question into the chat. To start off with, I wanted to discuss, societal challenges and barriers that this population experiences. So based on your experiences or your work, what are the key societal barriers that are unique to Black entrepreneurs in Canada, particularly for those with intersecting identities such as immigrants or women? Does anyone want to jump in first? If not, I can feel free to unmute and jump in, and I can also get us started as well. Perhaps I'll kind of speak from my experience in my work with Black immigrant entrepreneurs. I think the key thing that Black immigrant specifically entrepreneurs and then Black immigrant women entrepreneurs, the key barrier that they face is that, as we know already, Black entrepreneurs and racialized entrepreneurs in general, but Black entrepreneurs specifically, they face several barriers in their entrepreneurial journey. So, access to capital, lack of networking opportunities, and, upskilling and reskilling opportunities, things like that. I think the thing is, though, that the way I kind of think of it is when you have then as well those that are immigrating from other countries, they're kind of everyone else who's already here or was born here kind of already has a head start on addressing some of those barriers. But what I find from speaking to Black entrepreneurs and immigrant entrepreneurs in my work is that you kind of have to deal with all of the other challenges of integrating into a new culture and, dealing with all of the typical things that you would have to do immigrating to a country before you can even get to the same point as those who are born here, for example. So it's kind of like you have to go through all of these additional barriers just to get to the same point of having barriers for entrepreneurship. So it's definitely very additive. And often just that another key thing is not having those networks set up to, get that one-on-one support. I think that's another key thing that I hear a lot. So yeah, I think that the kind of just like additional barriers and learning the cultural norms and all of those things, those are really key. Yeah, does anyone else want to share? See that a friend in the chat said lack of knowledge, resources, capital to start up business. Yep, for sure. Yeah, I think the lack of knowledge one is really important because from, again, my experience and my work and my research, there are, of course, support programs available, but if the right people don't know about those programs, that's obviously that support is going to go unused. So that's really key. It sounds like some of the audience as well, you guys work with other immigrant populations other than Black entrepreneurs. Is there anything that you can share from your experience with other groups of immigrants in terms of the societal barriers that they experience that might also be relevant here?
Yes, thank you, Eliza. I can see I'm not working with the African group, but of course the first thing is the language barrier and the identity barrier. So some of them, they have a shy attitude, let's say, when they approach our organizations and they're asking for services to be delivered to them. So we can feel that. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, Sarah, thanks for sharing. Yeah, the language barrier is, of course, another key one. You know, if you're immigrating here to Canada and, you know, you don't know English or French, that is, of course, a huge barrier to kind of accessing the support programs that that are in place, as well as making those network connections. So yeah, that definitely is also applicable as well. I see we had another new joiner here. Welcome, Juliet. We just got started with our roundtable on Black immigrant entrepreneurship, and we're just starting the discussion with our sharing kind of some of our own experiences regarding and discussing some of the societal barriers that are unique to the Black immigrant population. Do you have anything to add on that, Juliet, in your experience, or if you want to share a quick intro about your background?
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. So my name is Juliet Kago, and I'm one of the co-founders of Whole Women Network Cooperative and Whole Women Network Social Enterprise. And basically, we work with immigrant women who are racialized, Black, Indigenous, people of color, those that own businesses, and those that are professionals. And what we do is really around financial literacy training and cooperative education so that they can work collectively instead of trying to do it alone. And yeah, and some business, like we offer business services also, especially when it comes to access to capital. So I think right off the bat for Black immigrant women, the core challenges for entrepreneurs in our, at least in our network, in our cooperative, include just the barrier to accessing capital to either start, or scale their businesses. The barriers around, just like those that want to export, like there's just this, they're not familiar with the environment, even if they were doing big businesses already back home. So it's like learning everything from scratch, right? The regulatory barriers in terms of, quality, in terms of even having the contacts and connections, right? So social capital is also something that we find people have gaps in because they're new, right? Relatively new in the environment. And then I think overall, like just really understanding the financial environment of Canada, because often it's very different from where they're coming. This is very credit-based, while a lot of them are used to more cash-based and ownership-based economies. So those will be kind of like the, in terms of business. And then, of course, the other things of building your market, if they have specialized products and services, being able to find the market for that. Sometimes if they are culturally, kind of culture-based products and services, the market is often smaller. And so it's how do you ensure that you grow that, like you get your products and services to a point where that other people can also, see a need for them. Yeah, so that's what I'd like to share at this point. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Juliet. That was it's really great to kind of hear some of that direct experience that you have working with Black immigrant entrepreneurs. So that's great, and certainly lines up, I think, with some of the things that were shared previously, and also that I shared based on my experience as well working with Black immigrant entrepreneurs. So thank you for that. I'm going to move on to the next question, still kind of talking about societal challenges and barriers. And This one is, I know, like I said, some of the audience here don't have experience specifically with Black immigrant entrepreneurs, so that's okay. This question is actually more general. So I wanted to know again from your experience working with the communities that you work with, what are some of the lesser discussed ways that systemic racism manifests itself in the Canadian entrepreneurial ecosystem? So again, I'll open up the floor to the audience for whoever wants to jump in first, and I'll also paste the question in the chat as well.
I think I don't know, I could start off. I think some of the lesser discussed ways, at least for me, lived experience as a Black immigrant myself, is the lack of understanding of informal ways of doing business. And not just the lack of understanding, but the unwillingness of the system to even acknowledge that what is informal also has value. And what is informal needs to be understood and then put in context to the formal structures that exist in Canada. And an example of that I'll give is informally. When I moved to Canada some like 25 years ago, what we leaned to in terms of raising capital was the more informal ways of groups of women coming together. I'm originally from Nigeria, so groups of immigrant women. We had women from Rwanda, Ghana, Kenya, like all of us. We came together and we started practicing a model called Susu, which the academics call Rosca, right? Where we each save a set amount and then we pull those resources together, and anyone that needs it for their business is able to access that, right? Sometimes you pay zero interest, sometimes just nominal interest, because it's a way to support ourselves. One of the earlier challenges we ran into was actually with the banking system. I was the one coordinating these, money pools from after-tax dollars. Like, these are monies that we've already earned from working and we're contributing to help ourselves. But we found that at least on 2 different occasions, 2 financial institutions has shut down my bank account because they couldn't understand the flow of money coming. And I literally have to go in to explain and show proof. They're asking for that I earned this, and I'm saying this is us coming together informally, and it just didn't make, because it didn't make sense to them. They shut it down, right? And I mean, this is something that I'm very passionate about, because from then on, I started studying about the system. I actually got into financial services. I used to be an engineer, but I got into financial services because of this, to really understand from the credit side, from the banking side, from the investment side. I became a financial investment professional, just to understand the system, the credit rating, all of that, and teach members of our community. But over time, what I've seen happen is that the more immigrants got into the system, we don't face those challenges as much. Because now when I go into the bank, the person at the counter or the manager is someone that looks like me, or someone that's another immigrant from, they could be from Asia, but they understand this money pooling system because they have variations of it in their countries. Right. So I think systemic, in terms of finance, that does happen. And then also, even with the credit system, we've had several members with, whether it's Equifax or TransUnion, when they get like a lower credit rating or something, just being able to fix that. There's a systemic issue where, for a lot of immigrants, paying off your debt is the way of life. Like, you don't want to be in debt, right? But often our members face a challenge where the more they pay off their debt, their credit score actually goes lower. And we've been challenging this. So there's this systemic thing that you have to owe and be paying on time, versus we want to pay it off. Like, why shouldn't we have, better credit that way? So there's a gap in culture and in what the formal system, accept. And because of that, we're kind of like building our own thing of how do we create credit ratings that are culturally informed, that work for us, since the formal system sometimes doesn't really work for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Juliet, for sharing. And I think we're hopefully going to get to some discussion kind of about the way forward and, how to move forward. But I think what that really highlights is the importance of like you said, having similar people involved at the top kind of, or behind the counter. And I don't think this just goes for things related to financing and stuff like that, but just overall having more diverse teams at the top in leadership positions or metaphorically behind the counter, as you said, as well as people that are open, right? People that are open-minded, and the importance of that, to be open to consider ways of doing things that are not what we typically do or the standard way of doing things, and challenging those standards actually. So thank you for sharing that. Yes, for sure. Does anyone else have anything that they want to share on that question about lesser discussed ways that systemic racism kind of manifests itself in the entrepreneurial ecosystem?
I will mention maybe, lack of mentorship very often. Also, in addition to this, what I'm thinking, quite often I think if people speak with accent, that is some things, which not necessarily will kind of, be helpful to them, that's kind of, what I will think. We are lucky here in Edmonton because we have, organizations which are very helpful. When people want to start business, and that's, I think it's really good, good things here, because lots of immigrants, although as you guys mentioned, there is so many different barriers to start the business, and I think also quite often you don't also want to rush to start the business right away, because you need to get to know the place, people, and those things need time to making sure that if you will start some things, you want to kind of make sure that you will cover as much as possible, and work towards success, to make sure that everything takes time and hard work, but at the end of the day you want to kind of make sure that on your side you did whatever you could to do good job, to offer really some things which people will value, and it will make you successful, and at the end of the day that's what will earn you money. That's what I'm thinking. And we like places like here in Edmonton, like Business Link, for example, are excellent place to start. We quite often work with immigrants who will ask us for support, for resources, and definitely that will be one of the first places. Now, in addition to this, it's just because, we and my colleagues, we work in the public libraries. I will also refer very often to the library staff, those peoples, to look for free courses and resources which public library offer. In Edmonton, we have amazing resources in the library, and those are free, and you can definitely take courses which will help you to start your own business, but also, help you to develop skills. Not everything, is the same back home and here, and that will be, one of the first stops, for me to making sure that people know how to access, how to connect, with those resources. And financial help. Also, there are some loans, which people can definitely, get. But loan is always loan, and first of all, you want to make sure that people have the skills as much as possible. Also the support, in community mentors, if possible. That again, that will be, some things which I think is very important. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing. I think I was kind of making little notes here as you were speaking to kind of try and capture all of the different things you mentioned, which was great. I think one of the things you definitely mentioned was the lack of mentorship, as well as kind of the stereotypes that may be associated with when you hear someone speaking with an accent. That for sure definitely is, I think, one of the ways that we see that manifesting for sure. I think the other thing you mentioned, and actually you mentioned, I think it was your organization. Would you be able to maybe share the link in the chat to the website? Just for anyone who is interested. I think that would be great.
My organization, or the organization which helps newcomers with their business. It's not just newcomers, but they have program for newcomers. It's called Business Link. That's not my organization. It's just, one of the organization in Edmonton which can definitely help them. But I will be more than happy. I can look for the link and definitely.
Yes, that would be great, I think.
Thank you.
To share. Appreciate that. And yeah, you another really great thing that you mentioned was the library. And again, I think the key thing just there is, again, it's not just having these supports available, but making people aware of them. So that's really important. Thanks everyone for sharing. Does anyone else have anything they want to contribute to this conversation? Oh, yes, perfect. Juliet also is sharing. That's amazing. Does anyone else have anything they want to contribute to this discussion about systemic racism manifesting itself?
I think overall, there just seems to be a more need for like intercultural trainings around diversity, equity, inclusion, and all of that across board, whether it's the financial institutions, the educational institutions, even government services, just so that there's more understanding of more immigrant communities. And specifically, like in the business space, I find that for how business structures are taught and how it's the different ways that we can start businesses in a lot of communities where they have, like the city has like a small business enterprise center where immigrants can go for resources. I find that a lot of those spaces too need to be very diverse in the people they're hiring, just so that there's representation and understanding of the different groups that are coming in. For an example that I'd like to give is most small business enterprise centers, at least in 2 cities that I've lived in, they lean towards like, oh, either come in and start as a sole proprietor or incorporate, right, as an incorporated entity. There's little or no personnel or expertise for cooperatives. And a lot of immigrant communities work in groups. Like we don't just start businesses one person, like the other lady had mentioned, you want to do your research. You also want to do it with other people, other like-minded people in the community, so that you share the risk and you're able to pool the resources. But when you want to start a business in that model, the cooperative model, it's not mainstream, right? So systemically in Canada, it's not mainstream. You really have to dig deep to find out the right people to help you. And it's unfortunate because the cooperative model exists in Canada, but it's not mainstream to the immigrants that really gravitate towards it. It's still very, very white, the way it's structured, the leadership, the organization. So I think there's more room to make that more mainstream, even at the municipal level. So people can start businesses, not just as individuals, where it's so expensive and the risks are so high, but they can pool together. Like if someone is making a particular product and you find 5 other women or, men, you can come together and share the risk and do it collectively. And we need the structures, the structural and systemic, support for that. Thank you.
Yeah, one of the things you mentioned that I definitely agree is not just with these support hubs, I guess, not just having diversity, but almost I would maybe call it diversity within diversity, to ensure that, there's so many different groups, and if you walk in and you're from country A, but there's only representation of country B, you might want to turn around and, not feel as comfortable. So I think that's really important. And that also just makes me kind of highlights to me the diverse experiences of diverse people, like, and the importance of disaggregated data as well, and like disaggregated support, I guess you could say, where it's important not just to have support and resources for racialized entrepreneurs overall, but we need to be more specific than that, because the barriers that each individual group faces are so unique. So it's important to have not just, overall representation of all racialized people or all immigrants, but those very specific intersecting identities. So I think that's really important. Maybe we'll move on, since we've kind of already started to talk about some of the different supports and policies that are out there. So maybe we'll just move on to the next set of questions, and we have a new addition to the group as well. So welcome. Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about organizational support and policy. In your experience, let's start off, kind of talking about the pluses or the bright side, I guess. What evidence do we have currently for the effectiveness of government initiatives and programs that exist to support Black entrepreneurs? And I guess in your experiences, what would you say, what progress would you say has definitely been made? And on the other hand, what gaps do you think still need addressing when it comes to these initiatives and programs? I'll leave it open to whoever wants to start. And again, like I said, I know this session is supposed to be specifically for Black immigrant entrepreneurship, but if anyone else has any other questions or any other experiences with other groups that they think might be relevant, please feel free to share.
I think there's been a lot of gains, a lot of positives, especially over the last, I'd say, 6-7 years, and particularly after COVID. There's been a focused attention on the Black entrepreneurial ecosystem, whether it's in terms of wraparound support that entrepreneurs need, in terms of getting the data, because before that just didn't really exist. But now, and thanks to the work of the Diversity Institute, And I know TMU is also part of that, like where we're getting the State of Women Entrepreneurship report. So that really helps. By sector also, there's been different organizations that are able to pull up reports like labor market report, just market demographics. That helps as an entrepreneur to have those data points to work with. In terms of funding, also a lot has been done. I mean, we're hoping more will be done, but we're really appreciative of the work that has gone into creating, funding organization like FACE, the FACE Coalition, which is specific to Black entrepreneurs, organizations like CASA Foundation. There's so many now. The Black Entrepreneurship Knowledge Hub that also helps with data. Black Opportunity Fund. There are just so many different funding streams now that we can tap into. And what's happening also is that government is helping, using an ecosystem lens where you're building strong coalitions, and these organizations are also partnering together, right? And because it's so specific to that demographic, you're able to also find out what the gaps are. Like if people are not accessing these funds, what are they lacking? Maybe operationally, governance, structurally, market intelligence, and get the culturally informed mentors and coaches. An example is the recent RAISE grant. I know our organization was one of the organizations that got that last year, and it was really helpful. What was really special about it was that they got coaches that understood the role of culture and the uniqueness that these demographics, as immigrants that we face, whether you're racialized or, Black, Indigenous, and that was very helpful. The opportunity for networking, meeting your peers, and just being able to share resources on a peer-to-peer basis, that was also really helpful. So I think overall, like more needs to be done, but I think there's just been some remarkable strides, and we're seeing the impact on businesses. Like we're getting more businesses that are doing well, and because they're doing well, they also are catalyzing other smaller businesses. And I quickly want to speak to even the credit unions and financial institutions. They themselves now have specialized products and services, right? And even funding streams for Black and other racialized demographics. So that's a plus because it means they're paying attention to even building their own market share, right? And incorporating these groups. So overall, I think there are some really bright lights that we can build upon. Thank you.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And you mentioned I'll give a shout out, a quick promo to our SOE report. Yeah, we're currently working on the next our SOE 6, so that will hopefully be released sometime next year. So that's great. But I think for sure, and what I've kind of heard from the entrepreneurs that I work with is that definitely since the pandemic, there's been a increase in support programs and grants and all of these things. I think the sentiment that I kind of hear sometimes though is that it's unfortunate that something like the pandemic or something like George Floyd, like those things had to happen to get this additional support and get people to realize that this support was needed. So I wanted to make sure I shared that because that's something that I hear quite often when I'm speaking to entrepreneurs. So I think that's really important. And you mentioned the RAISE program. I know that's with the Ontario government, and I know that program we've been also kind of working on that. And that program is absolutely incredible as well. Julia, thank you so much for sharing. Does anyone else have anything they want to add to this about progress that we've seen with government initiatives for Black entrepreneurs. And again, please feel free to share your own experiences or anything as well, working with other groups and progress there that, you know, perhaps could extrapolate.
Maybe I will add one more thing, you know, in general, Jazz. You know, what I think is very important for all of us is to listen to people, you know, that we serve, that, you know, which we work with. Because if we know that, and if we see that, you know, there is a need for more information, I think, you know, for us as the people who provide services for those newcomers, is very important to making sure that we will provide them with those resources, that we on our own will look for connection, for resources, the most updated information that we can share with those peoples. Because, you know, being new again in community, you want sometimes do some things, and you know, you have skills, but because you lack the ties to the community, to knowledge, to you know, you don't know necessarily where to look for those, you know, additional things which could be helpful. You know, that is some things that we are people, you know, I'm also in Canada. I speak with quite strong accent, but I'm in Canada for a long time. You know, I will have much better understanding, and you know, I believe it's also my responsibility, you know, if I serve my clients, my you know, people that I work with, that I will provide them, and you know, I will be the most educated, you know, in those resources that I can share with those people. I think we all have this kind of, you know, obligation to making sure that, you know, if we serve people, like, you know, I'm talking about myself, you know, newcomers, I really want to make sure that, you know, I will constantly, you know, work towards, you know, making sure that I'm better assessment practitioner, you know, in different aspects, what this role, you know, require from me. And you know, one of them, it will be knowledge of the resources in community, you know, policies, you know, whatever can support the people that I'm working with. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that as well. And I think, yeah, I definitely agree that kind of, you know, that iterative approach is really important when we're providing support, where, you know, you come in with your plan with, you know, based on research or previous experience, but then you also have to make sure there's opportunity to adjust that plan based on the needs of the group that you're working with. When we're doing evaluation work, I know, like in my experience here at the DI, that's definitely something we, you know, work into all of our programs that we work with, you know, that iterative approach, which is really important.
And if I can add, you know, one of the things which we quite often also offer, it's group sessions at the library, like Welcome to Canada. And one of the topics is also, you know, quite often how to start a business. Now, saying also that, you know, we strive to make sure that we will have the most, you know, current information, and, you know, that to best our abilities, you know, kind of always step up with the knowledge, and you know, whatever makes us as better settlement practitioners, you know. But you know, also we invite guests. It's not necessarily that we have to know everything. We will invite, you know, guests who can share their, you know, their knowledge, their resources. And definitely, again, when you listen to the community, to people that you are working with, you know, then that will be the another things which definitely can, you know, put those resources in much better place and together for people, for groups.
Yeah, I think that's also really important. Like, and again, I'm drawing on my own experiences, but just that understanding, and you kind of have to check yourself and be aware that, yeah, like, I do a lot of research on this topic, and I have a lot of knowledge from this end, more of an academic end. But the community partners that we work with, they're kind of, on the ground working with these communities firsthand. So, it's really important to take in that and be aware of that, and, just to recognize that we're not experts on everything, and it's important to kind of get different perspectives. That kind of brings me to my next question related to research and emerging trends. That, kind of contrast between, the more academic side of things, the policy side of things, and then also the, hands-on applied in the field kind of things. What are some ways, or how can we promote better communication and translation of findings, throughout the entire pipeline, like from the academic side, from the policy side, to the hands-on applied side? What things do you think we could improve there? Maybe I'll start, just given my experience. Obviously we're an academic institution, but we also work very closely and heavily with the community. And in my experience, and kind of what I've seen really have success, is that both groups kind of have to speak the other's language, if that makes sense. Oh yes, I can repeat the question. How can academics, policymakers, and community organizations collaborate to translate research findings into actionable support for Black entrepreneurs? And sorry, I didn't paste that in the chat. So yeah, I think what I would say to that is you have to speak the right language. So if you're an academic institution doing research on this, you can't be only translating your findings in, oh, I didn't share it with the whole chat. Let me share that again. Yeah, you can't just be speaking your academic language. You need to be presenting those findings in a way that would be relevant to policymakers or community organizations. And it goes the other way as well. Policymakers and community organizations, it's important for them to as well share their findings in kind of a way that is relevant to academics, so they can adjust, what they're doing research on and things like that. So that's what I would say. Does anyone else want to jump in?
I think I'll draw from examples of some of the work we've done with two educational institutions, U of T and then OCAD, actually, and George Brown too. So when in these institutions, when they were doing research work around financial inclusion and also around informal banking cooperatives, they included people from the community from the get-go as community researchers. So they had the academic researchers, but they also had the community researchers. So that collaboration from the beginning was very helpful in always making sure that the language was accessible, right? That the findings were things that were relevant to the community, and the buy-in from the community. So they're like engaging people, I think, from the get-go, taking on topics that are not just academic driven, but kind of co-creating even the areas of research, so that it's things that are meaningful to the community that's been researched, but like topics that really impact on them, so that there's that interest in it. And I think also the power, kind of like balancing out that power asymmetry, right? Because academics, like regardless of what you know, as academics, for them to be, and this was our experience, they were very respectful of indigenous knowledge, of Afrocentric, principles and values and lived experiences. Like they valued that as also as important as the academic, research, data stuff. And then the power of storytelling, the way that the reports were presented was very accessible, was very like they use storytelling a lot. They use graphics, they use art, some were like acted out in poetry form, so just being able to merge science and art and understand that people learn and receive information differently. And it helps to build trust. Like all our partnerships with educational institutions have been really, really positive. Just the way that they went about it. Thank you.
Yes, that is so important to kind of, know your audience. I think, and I'm not speaking for all academics, of course, but I think kind of typically with academics, we like to talk a lot, and we assume we're communicating with other experts and other academics, but you don't have to be an academic to be an expert, first of all, and not everyone speaks that language, and I think it's very limiting to present your findings only in a very academic, lots of numbers, lots of writing, no visuals kind of way, because that completely makes it less accessible to other people, and especially the people that could actually be using that research. So I think that's really important. We have about 6 minutes left, and I would like to just move to our last question, because I think that will be a good note for us to kind of all lead. Yes, decolonial lens as well. Definitely, Juliet. Thank you for sharing that as well. In the last 5 minutes, I want to pose the question of kind of like the future and kind of envisioning the way forward. The final question I want to ask is what actions should the government prioritize in the next 5 years to better support Black immigrant entrepreneurs? I sent that in the chat. I think I'll leave it open for whoever wants to jump in the last couple of minutes just to share their thoughts on that.
I think more structural pieces around like things around cost of living, right? The reality is that for immigrants, it is like, especially newcomer immigrant, the cost of living is so high. And with the, double jeopardy of not being able to get work or meaningful work that pays you well, a living wage for the first few months or even years that you arrive here, that gap has to be filled better. Things around, affordable housing, affordable daycare, because those are huge barriers. More programming when people arrive or even before coming. Like there's some things I think that if people are aware of prior to arriving, they'll be better prepared for, right? And then even when they arrive, newcomer programs really need to be more innovative, really need to be more grounded in reality, the reality that newcomers face in Canada. Again, I go back to housing because it's a huge cost. And now you even add things like food. I know that some of the challenges that some of our new immigrant members had faced was even when they had food insecurity and they had to use some either charitable food banks or those supported by the government, like a lot of the things that were even being offered then didn't have any cultural lens. The food was not good for their health. A lot of it was pre-packaged, canned with a lot of sodium, which for, like Black communities, things like diabetes already, obesity, so that gap. And what had to happen was groups like faith-based institutions started setting up alternatives in terms of support. So I think just overall structurally, government should not just, oh, we're opening our doors, immigrants are coming, without adequately, preparing for that, for how they're going to live, the time it takes to get a good job and the opportunities. And if people want to start businesses as soon as they come, there should be support for that, because that support should be different from people that are already living in Canada. That, yeah, it should be totally different. Thank you.
Yeah, I think I definitely agree. And I think to that point, my background is actually in psychology, and something that comes to mind a lot is one of these theories that you learn about in like first year psychology, and then people don't really think about after that, but it's Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So it's the idea that there's this triangle, this pyramid of needs, and you kind of need to fulfill the ones at the base, so like basic things like food, shelter, safety, before you can consider other things like your passions and starting a new business and things like that. And given the current climate and the economy and cost of living and housing and all of these things, I think actually the best way that the government can support Black immigrant entrepreneurs is actually not really to support directly the Black immigrant entrepreneur ecosystem, but to be addressing all of those things that come before. So like you said, food insecurity, housing, all of those things. We need to kind of, to get at that, to this entrepreneurship ecosystem, you need to address everything before that. So I think that's so important.
Do we have time for any more? Are we done?
I think we're right at 4 o'clock. So yeah, I think that's unfortunately all we have, but that was really great. Thank you everyone. Thank you, Julia. Thank you everyone else for sharing your perspectives, and yeah, hopefully you guys enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you guys.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thanks everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.